If you still believe we live in a meritocracy, you never understood the rules of the game. How many genuinely good, hard-working, and talented people do you know who struggle to get by? Now think about it. How many high-functioning sociopaths occupy positions of absolute power? It's not a coincidence. It's design. There is a disturbing paradox in the modern human experience. The more empathetic and conscientious a person is, the more they tend to feel out of place, frustrated, almost as if they are playing a game whose rules were written in a language they don't understand. Meanwhile, those who operate without scruples, who manipulate without remorse, and who view other human beings as mere resources to be exploited, seem to navigate life with disconcerting ease. This isn't happening in spite of the system. It's happening because of it. Think about the last time you saw someone truly cruel thrive. Maybe it was that boss who psychologically destroyed their subordinates but always met their goals. Or that politician who lied shamelessly but won votes. Or that influencer who exploited other people's insecurities to sell useless products, amassing millions in the process. You felt that punch in the stomach, didn't you? That mixture of anger and helplessness that makes you question whether there is any justice in the world. And then, as an automatic reflex, you probably thought, one day it will come back to them. But what if it doesn't? What if it never does? The darkest truth about our civilization is that it was structured to reward traits that, by any healthy definition of humanity, would be considered pathological. Lack of empathy became objectivity. Manipulation became leadership. Exploitation became efficiency. And we, who still carry remnants of moral conscience, have been conditioned to believe that the problem lies within us. Be more assertive, they say. Think of your own interests, they advise. Don't be so sensitive, they counsel. As if the solution to living in a sick society were to become a little sicker ourselves. But this perception is not new. More than 3 centuries ago, one man dared to look directly at this brutal truth and decipher it with mathematical precision. His conclusions were so dangerous that he was excommunicated, persecuted, and had his books burned in public. Not because he was wrong, but because he was too right. Baruch Spinoza not only identified why human predators thrive, he unveiled the invisible architecture that makes it inevitable. Even more disturbing, he showed that our moral outrage, our thirst for justice, our belief that good must prevail, are themselves part of the control mechanism. Today, I'm going to show you how Spinoza uncovered the cold, relentless logic behind the success of human predators. How he identified that our society didn't fail to create a fair system. It achieved exactly what it set out to do. And more importantly, how this understanding can free you from a game you never had a real chance of winning, because you didn't even know you were playing. Get ready to discover why you were programmed to question yourself, while they were programmed to question everything but their own ambitions. Amsterdam, 1656. A 23-year-old man walks through the cobblestone streets while the weight of a historic decision rests on his shoulders. Baruch Spinoza had just been expelled from the Jewish community with the most severe curse ever pronounced in Amsterdam. His crime? Asking questions that no one wanted to hear the answers to. But Spinoza was no ordinary rebel. He was a thinker who possessed something rare and dangerous. The ability to see through the collective illusions that keep societies functioning. And what he saw was so disturbing that the religious authorities preferred to destroy his reputation rather than refute his arguments. Spinoza saw something that the powerful of his time, and of today, would like to keep hidden forever. The universe is an immoral machine. There is no personal God judging our actions, no cosmic force ensuring that good always wins, no natural karma punishing the wicked. There is only what he called Deus sive natura, God or nature, a single, eternal, indifferent force that operates according to inflexible laws like a mathematical equation. To the modern mind, this may sound like atheism in disguise, but Spinoza was more radical than that. He was saying that nature itself is divine, but in a way that completely dissolves our moral fantasies about how the world should work. An earthquake that kills thousands is not divine punishment. A financial predator who destroys lives is not accumulating negative karma. Both are just natural expressions of forces in motion. This explains something you have always felt but never been able to articulate. Why does the world seem to systematically reward behavior you find abhorrent? The answer lies in what Spinoza identified as the most fundamental impulse of all existence, the conatus. Every being, from a rock to a psychopathic CEO, possesses an irresistible internal force that compels it to preserve and expand its own existence, its own potency. It is a survival instinct elevated to a universal principle. Now imagine an individual whose conatus operates without the filters that most of us carry: empathy, guilt, consideration for the well-being of others. For that person, the world becomes a chessboard where other people are simply pieces to be moved toward their goals. There is no internal conflict, no moral hesitation, no energy wasted on ethical questions. That is why in competitive environments, corporations, politics, financial markets, individuals with psychopathic traits not only survive but thrive. They are playing a different game, with different rules, while you are trying to apply a moral code that the system itself does not recognize. Spinoza knew that this truth would be unbearable for most people. It is more comfortable to believe that there is a cosmic moral order than to accept that we live in an indifferent reality where power, not virtue, determines outcomes. That is why he was silenced. That is why his books were burned. That is why even today, his most radical ideas are diluted or ignored by mainstream philosophy. But there was something even more dangerous in his vision. Something that threatened not only religious institutions, but the entire structure of social control of his time. And it is precisely this insight that explains not only why psychopaths win, but why the system was designed for them to win. The question that naturally arises is, if this is the real nature of the world, if this moral indifference is a fundamental characteristic of existence, then why do we remain trapped in the illusion that we should be good? Why the guilt? Why the frustration? Why this constant feeling of losing a game whose rules no one has explained to us? The answer is buried in Spinoza's most radical concept, the conatus. This Latin word hides a truth that few dare to confront fully. Every being in nature has an irresistible, almost gravitational impulse to preserve and expand its own existence. It is not a conscious choice. It is the most fundamental force that drives reality. Imagine two people born in the same hospital on the same day. One comes into the world with a standard nervous system, mirror neurons functioning perfectly, a prefrontal cortex developed to feel empathy, neural circuits that cause the suffering of others to generate genuine discomfort. The other is born with something different, neural connections that simply do not process the suffering of others as relevant. For the first person, making a decision that benefits themselves at the expense of another human being creates a real internal conflict. There is hesitation, guilt, a kind of emotional break that makes every selfish act a small psychological trauma. For the second person, that same decision is pure mathematics. Self-benefit versus personal cost. No emotional interference, no internal noise. Now put these two people in a 21st century capitalist economy. Who do you think will win? The system was not designed by chance to favor the second type. It was literally built by people who possessed these characteristics. Every institution, every power structure, every social reward mechanism was shaped by individuals whose conatus operated without the flaws of moral consciousness. Think about the fundamental logic of modern capitalism. Infinite growth on a finite planet through the maximized exploitation of resources, including human resources. This logic only makes sense to minds that can completely abstract the human cost of their decisions. For someone with functional empathy, the idea of profiting from the suffering of others creates unbearable cognitive dissonance. For a high-functioning psychopath, it's just system optimization. And here's the most subtle trick. The system not only rewards psychopathic traits, it pathologizes human normality. Empathy becomes emotional weakness. Moral hesitation becomes indecisiveness. Consideration for the collective well-being becomes naive idealism. Social consciousness becomes bleeding heart liberalism. The very qualities that make us human in the deepest sense of the word have been redefined as flaws to be overcome through personal development and growth mindset. Consider how psychopathic risk tolerance works. A normal person, when considering a decision that could destroy lives but generate profit, will calculate not only the financial consequences, but also the emotional weight of carrying that responsibility. The psychopath calculates only the probability of detection versus the magnitude of the gain. Without the burden of guilt, without the anticipation of remorse, their decisions become mathematically pure. That's why we find disproportionate concentrations of psychopaths in corporate, political, and financial leadership positions. It's not that they're smarter or more competent, it's that they're playing a completely different game. One where the moral rules that constrain the rest of us simply don't exist. But there's an even deeper layer to this dark architecture. The system doesn't just favor predators, it actively produces them. Each generation of children is subjected to a process of social Darwinian selection. Those who retain their natural empathy are systematically punished, marginalized, conditioned to believe there is something wrong with them. Those who learn to suppress their moral conscience are rewarded, promoted, held up as models of success. It is a process of domestication in reverse. Instead of civilizing our animal instincts, we are animalizing our civilization. And perhaps the most perverse aspect is how this is sold to us. Be your own CEO, they say. Think like an entrepreneur, they instruct. Develop a shark mentality, they advise. As if the solution to systemic predation were for us all to become lesser predators. Spinoza saw this with cutting clarity. What we call evil is often nothing more than conatus operating without moral filters. And in a society that structurally removes these filters, not only allowing but requiring their removal for success, the result is inevitable. But if this is true, if we really live in a civilization programmed to reward pathology and punish human normality, then an even more disturbing question arises. What is the true price of this apparent victory? What happens to those who conquer the world but lose their soul in the process? The answer lies in an observation that Spinoza made with surgical precision. There are two fundamental types of human emotions, what he called joyful passions and sad passions. The former increase our power to exist, our ability to act in the world, our sense of vitality. The latter diminish us, enslave us, make us less than we could be. Now take a close look at any successful psychopath you know. Behind the facade of confidence, the collection of material achievements, the apparent power, you will find something disturbing. A person completely dominated by the saddest passions of the human condition. Ambition that is never satisfied. Paranoia that corrodes every relationship. Envy that turns every other person's achievement into a personal wound. Obsessive fear of losing what you have accumulated. Existential emptiness disguised as focus on goals. It is not freedom. It is the most sophisticated form of slavery. Spinoza identified that when we act out of these sad passions, no matter how effective they may seem in achieving superficial goals, we are actually in a state of servitude. We are slaves to impulses that dominate us, control us, reduce us to automatons reacting to external stimuli. Think of the billionaire CEO who works 80 hours a week, not out of passion or purpose, but because the idea of stopping, of being alone with his own thoughts, is unbearable. Or the politician who compulsively accumulates power because his identity is so fragmented that he only feels real when he is dominating others. Or the influencer who manufactures a false personality because they have completely lost touch with who they really are beneath the mask. These individuals may appear free to outside observers. After all, they have resources, influence, and the apparent ability to shape the world to their will. But inside, they are prisoners of a psychological machinery that compels them to repetitive, destructive, fundamentally empty behaviors. This is where Spinoza's analysis becomes truly radical. What our society defines as success is often a disguised form of self-destruction. The person who conquers the world through manipulation and cruelty is not gaining anything real. They are systematically losing their ability to experience the only things that make human existence genuinely valuable. Real joy. Not the superficial pleasure of acquisition, but the deep satisfaction that comes from acting in harmony with our highest nature. Authentic connection. Not networks of contacts or subordinates, but relationships based on mutual understanding and genuine affection. Inner serenity. Not external control over circumstances, but the peace that comes from being aligned with oneself. The winning psychopath is systematically cut off from these experiences. Their inability to feel empathy is not just a competitive advantage. It is a neurological deficiency that prevents them from accessing entire dimensions of human experience. It's like being colorblind at an art exhibition. You can navigate the space, you can even evaluate the works technically, but the essential experience is lost forever. And there is an even darker price. Modern neurological studies confirm what Spinoza intuited philosophically. Brains that operate without empathy literally or eventually atrophy in areas responsible for the experience of meaning, purpose, and lasting satisfaction. It's like a muscle that, when not used, progressively wastes away. This explains something you may have noticed. Why do seemingly successful people often exhibit such self-destructive behaviors? Why do billionaires develop grotesque addictions? Why do powerful leaders make such obviously self-sabotaging choices? Why do famous influencers have disproportionately high rates of depression and suicide? It's not bad luck or cosmic irony. It's the inevitable result of a life built on sad passions. When you remove the ability to experience genuine joy, real connection, and authentic purpose, what's left is a void that no amount of external achievements can fill. Spinoza knew this would be the hardest part to accept. It's more comfortable to imagine that the bad guys are rewarded with genuine happiness than to confront the more disturbing truth. They won a game that isn't worth playing. They earned prizes that don't satisfy. They accumulated power that doesn't liberate. But if this is true, if the apparent victory of predators is in reality a sophisticated form of self-deception, then where is the way out? How can those of us who refuse to sacrifice our humanity navigate a world that seems to punish that choice? Is there really a way to win without becoming what we despise? The way out exists, but it's not where you think it is. It's not in defeating the predators at their own game, nor in waiting for some external force to restore cosmic justice. It lies in something much more radical, completely refusing to participate in the theater of illusion. Spinoza offered a perspective that our culture of self-help and personal motivation has not yet been able to digest. True revolution happens when you stop reacting emotionally to the provocations of the system. When you develop what he called intuitive knowledge, the ability to see things as they really are, stripped of the emotional interpretations that keep us trapped. Think of it this way. Every time you feel anger when you see a corrupt person prosper, you are feeding the very energy the system needs to keep functioning. Your moral indignation, your sense of injustice, your desire for something to be done. All of these are forms of reactivity that keep you psychologically enslaved to the very patterns you claim to despise. The predator doesn't win just because he's cruel. He wins because he's achieved something most people never develop: total emotional indifference to the power games around him. Ironically, the truly free person needs to cultivate a similar quality, not cruelty, but imperturbability. The difference is that one comes from a lack of empathy, the other from an understanding too deep to be shaken. When you truly understand that the universe is an amoral machine, something extraordinary happens. You stop expecting it to behave morally. When you fully accept that psychopaths thrive because the system was built by and for psychopaths, you stop being shocked when it happens. And when you stop being shocked, you stop wasting emotional energy reacting. You finally have mental space for something much more powerful: conscious choice. Here is the most beautiful paradox of Spinozian philosophy. When you accept that everything is determined, that you have no control over external forces, you discover that you have complete control over the only thing that really matters: how you respond internally to those forces. The psychopathic CEO may have billions, but he is doomed to an existence of growing emptiness. You may have fewer material resources, but you have access to something he will never know: the ability to experience genuine joy, real connection, inner peace that does not depend on external circumstances. This is not cheap consolation. It is recognition of a fundamental truth. There are two completely different ways to measure victory. The system taught you one: accumulation, domination, material success. Spinoza revealed the other: understanding, serenity, inner freedom. The person who consciously chooses to live by rational principles, who cultivates relationships based on genuine affection, who finds purpose in personal growth and social contribution, is not losing to the psychopath. They are playing a completely different game. A game where victory is measured in terms of expansion of consciousness, not expansion of the bank account. And here lies the real revolution. When you stop trying to win their game and start playing your own game, something amazing happens. The power they wield over you simply disappears. Not because you have become stronger than them, but because you have stopped accepting the basic premises that give meaning to their power. Spinoza knew that this would be the hardest part to accept. We are so conditioned to believe that the only way to win is to accumulate more external power, that the idea of completely redefining what victory means sounds like resignation. But it is not resignation, it is evolution. True Spinozian freedom is not the absence of external limitations. It is such a deep understanding of how the world works that you no longer need to react emotionally to its imperfections. It is developing such a solid inner fortress that neither external chaos nor the apparent success of predators can destabilize you. In the end, they may have built the rules of the material game. They may have designed systems that reward pathology and punish virtue. They may have created a civilization where calculated cruelty is more effective than genuine kindness in achieving tangible power. But they will never control the only arena that truly matters. The silent space within your own consciousness, where you decide who you are when no one is watching. Where you choose your values not based on what works, but on what is true. Where you build an identity that does not depend on external approval or material achievements. This is the quietest and most radical revolution possible. Simply refusing to feed your emotional energy to a system you recognize as fundamentally insane. And discovering that in doing so, you don't become powerless. You become incorruptible. The greatest act of rebellion is not trying to destroy the Matrix. It is simply stopping believing in it.
If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You're subscribed to the channel, you watch the videos, you reflect on every idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to take this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the White Rabbit Codes is ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.